This evening on The Rock Newman Show, Emanuel is an important new documentary film that focuses on the aftermath and surviving family members of the Emanuel Church massacre. The film is the first project of a production company created by NBA great Steph Curry and award-winning actress Viola Davis. Tonight, we'll talk with one of those family members, a first responder and Emanuel's producer. That's coming up on the next Rock Newman Show. Welcome to the Rock Newman Show from the campus of historic Howard University, right here in the nation's capital. I'm Rock Newman, and it is my desire to inspire you with personal stories of extraordinary achievement. On the evening of June 17, 2015, Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old white nationalist, opened fire on worshipers during Bible study at Charleston's Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, killing 9 people. Joining me now to discuss the Emanuel documentary are Rose Simmons, whose father was among those killed that evening, film producer Dimas Salaberius, and first responder Tiffany Salaberius. Folks, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Pleasure.
I don't know in the 6 years that I've been doing this show if I have ever had as much difficulty determining how I wanted to start the show. This is such an incredible story, Emanuel. Brother, your book, Street God, and your life and your journey with your wife, Tiffany, is it's a movie all of itself. And what you and your family and those others who were taken out that night have had to endure. So I've struggled, but here is where I've decided I'd like to start. If you would take us back, it was June the 17th, 2015. You did not find out, Rose, until the following day that your dad had been so senselessly murdered. I'd like to ask you if you could walk us back to June the 18th, how you got that news and how you felt about that news.
Well, Rock, actually, I have a story inside of a story.
We're the Rock Newman Show. We want to hear all of those things.
I was actually incarcerated when my father was killed.
Okay.
The prison officials came to me the next day and told me that my father was in the church. I was actually watching it on television. I believe at the time I was looking at the TV, they had already caught Dylan Roof. They were showing the senator's picture on the television, but they hadn't shown the rest of the victims.
And you said the senator, one of the victims was the senator.
Yes. Was the Senator Pinckney.
Yeah, Pinckney, right.
And as I watched his picture go across the television, I said, well, I know Daddy lives in North Charleston, but I haven't heard any news, so everything's good.
Yeah.
And probably at that moment, they called me into the office. And when I saw them come around the table where I was seated, I knew something had happened. But somehow I didn't connect it, even though I just finished watching it on television. Yeah. And they said, yes, your father, he was in the church. And, you know, it's a terrible thing in itself. Then being in a state where I was at that time and having to grieve on cue, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. which is what I had to do. So in that situation of being incarcerated, I had to stay in control of my emotions, and I just really had to find some strength instantly. I couldn't think about necessarily how he died or why he died, simply that he was gone, and that I had to figure out what to do next. What was my next step?
Let me just stay here for a second, guys. Did you feel a sense that someone has murdered my dad? Did you feel a sense of rage and revenge? What did you feel emotionally?
Never felt rage or revenge.
You did not?
Never felt that. My only thoughts were of my dad, and my God, he's with the Lord, was my first thought. Yeah. And then I guess because I was in that situation, I didn't know if I was going to be allowed to participate in any of the services. Yeah. So I really had to stay focused for my situation.
Yeah.
And happy to say that all things worked out well for me during that time. Yeah. And I was able to travel, and it really is a story in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll certainly come back. Tiffany and Demas. Demas. Demas has a book, folks. It's called Street God. Street God. At the very top of this, it says, you won't find a more amazing account of how God's grace can change lives. That's on the front. On the back, it says, his street name was Daylight, but he was a nightmare. And it tells the story of a teenager who went into the darkness of crime and drugs and being one determined to rule the streets, to be the king of the streets, who somewhere along the way had his road to Damascus moment. I know a little something about streets. Not a whole lot. Somewhere I heard that Saul became Paul. Demas, if you could share a little of your background and a little of your story and a little of that darkness.
Yeah, it'd be an honor. I mean, my mother was a principal of a school, elementary school. My father was a captain of a jail called Rikers Island in New York City. So this should have never been my story.
Wow.
And we lived in the largest middle-class African-American community in the country at that time.
And that
was St. Albans, Cambria Heights, Queens,
okay.
that area. And so everywhere I looked, there were working people, working class, and there were really no fears. I remember as a kid, I knew that there was something going on with a little bit of marijuana, and that was the most I knew about. But when crack cocaine came through, my parents, neighbors, no one knew that the streets and the neighborhood was changing in rapid speed. Me and my friends said, man, before that, even fights and violence would happen between a guy and a guy. No one ever thought about guns.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, guns start showing up in the neighborhood. And we said, man, there's something going on here that is really evil.
And the time that you're recollecting now,
I'm talking about 87, 88, 89.
You're how old at that time?
I started selling drugs at age 11.
Okay.
So I saw the movie Scarface when I should have never seen it. And I came out with my, youthful thoughts as an 11-year-old. I said, wow, I can make money like that?
Oh, man.
And I said, wow. I said, I would love to do that. And then I went to school, and a friend in junior high school had stole some drugs from his brother. And he said, hey, man, you want to help me sell it? And we went right out started to deal. And then I was always a little sharp, so I was like, man, let me find the largest drug dealer because I want to become, you know, Tony Montana, you know. So I said, these little peons out here ain't gonna get me there. So I started
You had big dreams.
Yeah, so I started to find those large drug empires and said, hey, can I get involved? Can I get in? And started to learn the ropes from many of those guys who, you know, Kenneth McGruff from the Supreme Team, the movie New Jack City's made about them. They executed a cop named Officer Edward Burns, where President George Bush Sr. had his badge on the campaign trail. So I was a part of seeing this whole war on drugs come to life, and very quickly I worked for those guys, saw that they were brutal killers, and I said, I don't want to become them, so I broke away from that, took their knowledge, and dominated my neighborhood with drugs, which was in Cambria Heights, Queens.
How difficult was it? You didn't grow up in a single family home. You didn't grow up in a foster home. You had, as you said, you know, you're working, educated parents. How did you manage to have that kind of independence, having been in that two-family household?
So what happened was my mother and father, they had separated geographically more than anything else, where my father lived in an area called Bayside, Queens, and my mother lived in the Cambria Heights area. So because of that, my father was always a phone call away, and if he would drive with that Cadillac, I mean, my heart would go to my throat. But what happened was I made a very dark vow, and I said, I'm gonna sell drugs to the day I die. And I meant it. And I had already figured out, I said, probably gonna get arrested several times, and my parents probably gonna beat me, you know, I may end up, a lot of things are gonna happen, but this was gonna be my path to great success, because I wanted it now. I saw another 11-year-old school driving a Volvo. And I said, well, if that knucklehead can do this, I'll probably have an airplane. You know, so I was like, look, you know, I'm gonna do this thing. And by making that foolish commitment, that no matter what consequences was coming my way, I just took it as it's a part of the road. It's a part of the road to success.
What an extraordinary example of you become what you think.
Yes.
That's one thing. You become what you think. You thought this. You envisioned this.
There was a level of law of attraction as well.
Law of attraction, it manifested what you think. So the value of hearing just that part of your story, folks out there with children and folks who are all ages, you become what you think. Tiffany. Disclosure. Everybody. I used to hold Tiffany by the hand when she used to waddle around as a 2 or 3-year-old. Her dad, Chuck Hinton, was my baseball coach at Howard University for many, many years. And I certainly know the foundation, the principles of how you were reared, your mom and your dad. When I have thought about talking to you, I really went back and recalled some of the conversations that I had with Betty Shabazz, who was the wife of Malcolm X. Her parents once asked her, told her, why would you consider marrying this man that has had this kind of a history, this kind of a horrible existence, drugs, all kinds of illegal behavior and the rest? And she said to them, Mom, Dad, there's a certain joy in being with a man when he's ready to be a man. Tell us about your meeting Demas and how this relationship unfolded, knowing what your history and faith has been and what his has been.
So I met Demas in late 90s, in 99, I think. So he had already finished with all of his street godness, and I met him in church. So I met him leading young men I mean, he was a head above everybody else, and just leading young men and, you know, just going hard for Christ, and just his character, his integrity, the things that you grow up emulating and that I grew up emulating or loving about my own dad. I saw those character traits in Demas. And so I didn't meet that person.
But let me ask you this, and I get that. I very much get that. But did you interrogate him? Did you do some serious interviewing of him?
Okay, so when I met Demas, he was totally Joe College, and just, he was nothing like that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And he probably was smart. Like when we met.
He was doing it. Yeah, when he was in that darkness.
No, I'm talking about when we met.
Okay.
So when we met, he was not like, oh, I used to be all this, and that. He said he had, as a teenager, sold some drugs or whatever.
Right.
I grew up in D.C., so the propensity of me meeting young guys that had dabbled in that and gotten out, I mean, clearly, like, you couldn't have been doing anything serious. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He was so sweet and just so precious until I really didn't think that he was, like, deeped out into the situation, until he picked me up one time from a hair salon, and the person knew him from back in the day, and they was like, wait a minute, your boyfriend is Daylight? I said, you know Daylight? Tell me about Daylight. You know, and he would tell me trickles, but I honestly just couldn't believe it. It's like if you met, you know, whoever you think of as precious and sweet, and then somebody, I mean, I just, so,
and I'll say,
he was totally different.
I would have never had a chance with this woman if I would have said, yeah, I was this and I was that.
Right.
Like,
Took some time.
I even tell people that get out of NA and NAA, and you probably meet them. Don't walk around, I've been off drugs, you know, 6 weeks, 2 days in 1 hour. Like, you know, that's nobody's business. So she got to see someone that was in development. I was playing vocabulary tapes. I was reading. I was studying. I put myself into college, and I grew up in a very high, you know, a middle class area. So it wasn't like straight out of Compton.
So look, so we are here in obviously because of one of the most just horrific acts in a house of worship. 9 folks get murdered. We've got a couple of tapes we're going to play.
Okay.
Before I get to the tape, I just want to ask for you guys to explain, whichever one you want to take this first. Where were you? How did you get involved, and why did you get involved in what happened? You guys aren't from North Charleston. You're not a member of that church. If you could give us sort of a Reader's Digest version of how it first got started.
So we met in an AME church.
Okay.
In Queens, the big mega church in Queens that was very prominent and similar to Emanuel, Mother Emanuel. And that morning when I woke up on June 18th happened to be my daughter's fourth birthday. And so I'm waking up ready to celebrate, and then I turned on the news and my heart was broken. And I just was weeping, and I woke up my husband. I said, we just have to go, you know? There's some things that impact you beyond you can just read it in the newspaper or look at it on the news. You have to engage. And I guess the way that I was brought up with my dad and with my mom, they were the type of people who always had their hand to the plow. They weren't about just well said, but well done. And so I felt like this is a moment where there's pervasive darkness, and I'm not going to leave it on anybody else to enter in light, to be light in that situation. I will take that on.
And you were in New York at the time?
We were in New York at the time, and within hours we assembled a team, and the 2 of us, along with our 2 little girls and 5 other people from New Jersey, we flew out to Charleston to just be the light. And then
so you went ahead of Demas?
No,
we went together.
So what happened was I had just spoken at a church, and people were like, the next mission that comes up, let us know. And when we saw this, Tiffany being Chuck Hinton's daughter, she's no excuse. She's like, let's go, let's make it happen. let's do it now. And then she said, remember, call that church as well. So I called them and I said, hi. I said, remember we just talked about doing something? Yeah. I said, well, we're going today.
Wow.
And we were booking the flights. So we did have some systems in place to book all the flights, make cars, start heading down. And we said, we're going to go. And what she means by going to be the light is our first focus was what victims are there, what family members we can connect with, who we could help, you know, through this, because we've seen all kind of loss. This is something that we do. So we got in front of that church, and there were 2,000 people there, and white, black, you name it, not knowing what to do. And I just said, man, I said, well, folks, let's gather around. We're going to pray for the families, first of all. And then I said, every 30 minutes, we're going to do that.
Here.
Yeah.
So you go there and you see all these people. You see congregated where the church was. And something led you, or your instincts, or what you had been doing, because you had been doing some of this work before, had given you the experience. Did you get to the microphone? Did you say it from the back? How did that happen that anyone paid attention to you?
So first I saw these 2 clergymen there, and I walked up to them. I said, what are y'all going to do? And to this day, I don't know. One of them said, Pastor Demos, call me by name. They said, you do it. So I said, all right. So I'm a New York street preacher too. So I grabbed a piece of, it looked like a bench. And I saw all the media out there. I said, everyone, prayer vigil in 5 minutes. Now I got a big mouth. If I want to yell, I can yell. You know, so I just announced this. And next thing you know, all these thousands of people started to gather. I got up on that bench, and CNN, Fox News, PBS, every station you come up with put their cameras there. And we just started to go into prayer. We just started to share that this community has been deeply hurt. We need to share, you know, that everyone that's white or whatever, this guy wanted to start a race war. We're not letting that happen, you know. And we just started to go there and say, everyone out here is important. Everyone out here is hurt. And minutes later, a white man put his head in my chest, and he said to me, he said, I'm a member of the Klan, but after hearing what you said, I am done being a part of the KKK.
This incident, this experience, it moved the country. It would reverberate it around the world. It also brought in the President of the United States. And we have a video. Let's take a look.
This morning, I spoke with, and Vice President Biden spoke with Mayor Joe Riley and other leaders at Charleston to express our deep sorrow over the senseless murders that took place last night. Michelle and I know several members of Emanuel AME Church. We knew their pastor, Reverend Clementa Pickney, who, along with 8 others, gathered in prayer and fellowship and was murdered last night. And to say our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families and their community doesn't say enough to convey the heartache and the sadness and the anger that we feel. Any death of this sort is a tragedy. Any shooting involving multiple victims is a tragedy. There is something particularly heartbreaking about a death happening in a place in which we seek solace and we seek peace, in a place of worship. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that, once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun. Now is the time for mourning and for healing. But let's be clear. At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. And it is in our power to do something about it. I say that recognizing the politics in this town foreclose a lot of those avenues right now. But it'd be wrong for us not to acknowledge it. And at some point, it's going to be important for the American people to come to grips with it. And for us to be able to shift how we think about the issue of gun violence collectively.
There's much to be impressed about by how he handled that. Part of what comes to mind is he didn't say there were good people on both sides. Let me ask you guys. One of the things that happens in you all, you're obviously people of faith. So forgiveness is a cornerstone and is a foundation of your faith. There are those that very much criticized people in the media who seem to come forward when an African American is terrorized and hurt, murdered, who some of their first questions are, do you forgive the perpetrator? So I'd like for you all, let me ask you, it was your dad. Yes. Where are you on the meter? Where were you immediately afterwards and now on the meter of forgiveness?
Well, actually, my meter hasn't moved. I started with forgiveness. As I said, when I was watching the television, I saw that they had already caught the killer. And immediately, before I even knew that my father was one of the victims, I started praying for him. Because I saw...
Started praying for the perpetrator.
Dylan Roof, yes. While incarcerated, yes. And I saw a young man that was lost without Christ. I saw darkness, that an evil presence to make someone do something like that. And I know that when you are without Christ, there's no good in there. So, and I've said this on many interviews, there was a quiet joy for the victims because I knew that this was an honored death. That's what I saw.
What does that mean?
That means that they were chosen. That means that their lives were given to this world as seeds to be planted for things like this to happen. What we're doing here today is a result of their blood being spilled. What's happening all over the world when people are having these conversations about forgiveness and love and unity amongst the races and even in the body of Christ, it is because of their blood. So I saw that from the very beginning. And when you want to say compassion, I actually felt sorry for the killer.
That is that's an incredible testament to your foundation. Obviously, one would have to recognize that part of the greatest of humanity is the ability to be able to have the wherewithal to sort of live to our highest self and have that kind of humanity. Oftentimes, being human, we don't reach that. Demas?
Yeah, what I've learned about forgiveness is that forgiveness is more for also the health of the individual. We've all, I'm sure, living the life you've lived, saw people who were stuck in unforgiveness. I have some people that don't go to work because my dad did something to me and I'm not letting it go, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so forgiveness does not mean that the family didn't push for justice to be done. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the families didn't show up every time in court to make sure that the proper judgment was going to take place. But I noticed, and Rose said something that was very loaded that I'd love to unpack, when she said the different people knew. Like, there was one woman who wrote letters to all her kids and grandkids, Susie Jackson.
Yeah.
And she said, after writing the letter, she said, "Bye, house, I'll never see you again," and left. There was someone else that was very young, whose son, Chris, is Christopher Singleton's playing baseball. And she grabbed her sister and said, "Listen, if something happens to me, this is what you need to do." And she's like, "Why are you doing?" So several of them felt that something was coming. And I mean, I can
Several
walk you
of
through.
Several of the
The
victims.
victims.
Several of the victims.
All the
Yeah.
victims. Yeah. The young man,
Tawanza.
Tawanza
He gave
Sanders,
all of his, yeah.
he started giving away all of his property
As an offering.
as an offering to the church. Like, I play with this, but I'm not going to take all of this. And then days later, he perished in a shooting. So something very divine happened that you can't explain away as to how each and every, and I can walk you through every last one of them that'll have you like, what? I mean, just, I know some families were like, chill out. They're like, I'm serious. If something happens to me, this is exactly what you got to do. And people are like, no, they're like, do you hear what I'm saying? I mean, outrage.
People that weren't sick, people
They
that
weren't
were young.
sick, they were healthy, they were
right.
everything. They said,
They
just
were announcing
understand.
to their loved
They were
ones
announcing
that
to
in
their
the
loved
event that
ones.
something happens to me,
Right.
here's how
Yes.
I want you to behave.
Now, I don't know how you explain that away, but also I could say this: the ones that have made the decision to forgive, it's like they said just the weight of the whole thing left. So it wasn't a cop-out to say, oh, you know, I'm trained as African American. You always got to forgive when someone does something bad to you. It wasn't that at all. And I hope by people going on June 17th to see the film that'll be in theaters nationwide the same day as the anniversary on Monday, June 17th, that they can check it out. And they'll begin to see, like, this is something way deep. So that's why when Steph Curry, Viola Davis, when you hear these stories, you're like, wait, something special about this, and I need to plug in.
So in other words, that piece about forgiveness, because there was a lot surrounding this, is that the forgiveness unlocks something valuable.
Yeah.
Tiffany?
Right, definitely. You know, I had the luxury of not necessarily having to focus on forgiving Dylan Roof for what he did, but focus on my response to the situation. And instead of just getting upset or, you know, definitely as an African American, I can go through my own litany of things that I feel that we can expose to the world about how we're done wrong. But my response as a woman of faith is, what can I do in this situation in spite of? And the God that I serve wastes nothing. So even though this was permitted, it's not, I mean, we're not going to blame God and say, how would you let this happen? You know, what kind of world would we live in? How would history be informed if every single deviant action by every individual, billions the world over, had God divinely interrupt every foul situation? Where would history be? So though it's not his will that something like this happens, it was clearly permitted. And yet, even in that, while that is going on, hours later, I'm being spoken to, my husband's being spoken to, all different things, all different rays of light can come out of it, you know, where it's not wasted.
And part of what comes out of it is, just recently here on the campus of Howard University, we had a screening of Emanuel. And in order for that to happen, so much had to happen prior to that. If you guys can start to help us understand how Emanuel came together, the message of the movie, And just if you could walk us through, okay, so you guys go down and just kind of take us on that path.
I could take you on a quick journey. So after going down, we went down several times and continued to meet with families. We were at the funeral. We marched with the church. We got adopted. They called us like
honorary Emanuel.
I became the honorary Emanuel family members and pastor engaged. So about, the money ran out of doing the trips. We had to pay for normal stuff. And about a year or so later, a young man named Brian Ivie, who did a film called The Dropbox, which was a huge successful documentary nationwide. He said, hey, I'd love to come and talk to you. And said, all right, let's meet. And on our way walking to meet him, my wife stops and says, I don't know why, but I really feel like we're going to become producers. And I said, all right, your wife tell you something, you go, okay, So I'm like, all right, let me see if that happens. I don't know. So we walked in. I thought we were going to meet about talking about my book, Street God, because that's what most people want to meet us about.
Sure.
And then, lo and behold, he starts to say, man, there's a project I really want to do, and it's about Charleston, South Carolina. The two of us just jerked back like, what? I said, we were there.
He had no
idea.
Our
I said,
involvement
we
in-
were
in
there
Charleston.
day two. We were on the ground. We met all these people. So he was like, oh my goodness. And then from there, he said, would you help us to do this film? Yeah. And then we said, but with one caveat, we have to give, as producers, the money away to the families. So this film, we're not making money off. If it makes $30 million or whatever it makes, we as producers are not taking money for that. We want that to go to Rose. We want that to go to the other family members so that they can feel blessed and helped, because it's, they had to live through it, not us.
Wow. And so, okay, so that was Brian.
Yes.
And then, when did you first hear about this?
The movie?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I came to the initial meeting with Brian and Demas, and they took some time, telling the families what they wanted to do, and honestly, the response was,
Some skepticism.
Yeah,
Sure.
lots of it. But I just saw him on television, and I walked up to him. I said, I know you. I've seen you. So I really, I was very comfortable with it. And just from that day, I have been working along with Brian and with Demas and the whole team. So I enjoyed it.
So then I would take it that you and the family members, if you can speak to some extent for the family members, have felt as if you all have been properly respected and the memories of your lost ones are being properly honored.
I do believe that is the sentiment of all the family members. I do believe that. And I will say honestly, from my perspective, that yes, they have been very well respected. I think it's a great storytelling. I think that just hearing about what happened that night, and as you asked me, how did you hear about it? And I think what it does, it opens up the world to our feelings. And I think that's what the world really wants to know, because as you said, if you can live to the height of your humanity, people who may not think that they can do the same thing, but when they have this great example, and not in any least to say that I'm an example, but to see this being lived out and played out, and especially, as I said, as we all were in the midst of the media, having to grieve on cue. Yeah.
Tiffany, you've seen the movie, obviously.
Yeah.
What is the central message of the movie, and what What do you want the viewer, as one of the producers, what do you want the viewer to get from that?
I think that one of the central themes that I love about the movie is the perspective of what the strength of forgiveness takes. That is beautifully handled. But also, I feel like when national crises happen, we have these knee-jerk reactions where we try to get this kind of expert or this person to cry on cue and all this other kind of stuff. And real dialogue, real exposition of the problem is not necessarily done. And that is the value of this film. So it deals with the history of racism in Charleston, obviously reflective around the nation. It deals with the personalization of that pain for family members in a way where in our social media society, we're detached, we feel great about ourselves if we just say hashtag pray for Charleston, pray for Paris, insert pray for Ferguson, pray for Baltimore, pray for, you know, all this, that's it. But there are real lives being affected and being hurt and impacted by what's going on. How do our leaders respond? So even looking at President Obama and his response, how can we dialogue over the topic of race, over the topic of how the police dealt with Dylan Roof? You know what I'm saying? And so these are all different things that, honestly, given what was going on, forgiveness was the big headline. We didn't really delve into all these different things. You know what I'm saying? And so this gives the nation an opportunity to dialogue at a high level, at a high intellect and high intention about what we can discuss as a nation, as opposed to just having an emotional response until the next big thing comes along. You know?
I would just add on to that. A show like this, you know, this is better than just news. We're now dealing with this over a nice block of time. But you know, current news today is 3 minutes and 20 seconds or 5 minutes the max they really like to deal with on an issue. So documentaries now are becoming real brilliant works of journalism with entertainment, but really giving hardcore truth. So in the film, one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted the voices of the families and the voices of those that experienced from the highest level, from Nikki Haley was governor at time, to Mayor Rowley and others that were in leadership, to really hear what all these perspectives were, and as filmmakers to kind of put all those voices together in a way that you heard. And you hear some really tough things. When they arrested Dylan Roof, who was an armed man, armed and dangerous, the white officers put their guns away and walked up to him like they were dealing with a gentleman fresh out of like a traffic stop. And there were people that said in South Carolina, if that was an African American, he would not be alive today. There's no way he would be arrested in one piece. I didn't say that, but that's the voices of the city that were speaking, saying
further highlighted,
his reality.
You know, the difference in treatment, in part, also was highlighted by them taking him to Burger King.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of that narrative.
I was arrested. I never got a cheese sandwich. I would have settled for a French fry. They gave me nothing. But,
so,
you know.
so let's talk about, because man, I mean, you got this to expose. You said exposition. I think that was a good word. You know, this film does that. In order for it to have the life that it has, you had to get fuel in the tank. And so Viola Davis came on board. Steph Curry came on board. How much do you know about how it was that they were attracted to this? And if you could tell us about what their role has been.
Yeah, I mean, from the very genesis, Viola Davis wanted to meet with the families. She wanted this story to be told. She felt an extreme personal connection from from where she was born and raised. She was born and raised in South Carolina. So that was very personal to her. Steph Curry as well, he was impacted by it, but Steph is on the road. He's balling. He didn't have time. So once he developed a production company, he was very eager to see what was going to be done with this. Who's going to tell this great story, and how could this be? And both of them don't want to get paid, or their companies want to get paid. They're like, we want this to be a gift to the families. So this was unique. Even that shows unity. How often do you hear of one great actor, one great celebrity coming together to do something? I don't hear it a lot. You know, so this is a real message about unity. And those two are both very stellar characters. Steph Curry made it his business, said, I want to come and be at, you know, Howard University. I want to spotlight this. His mother, with great tears, said, this is, I care about basketball, but I care about his celebrity doing things like this way more.
Using his
and
platform.
It was, she said it was one of her one of the most proudest moments she had of her son. Was sitting on the stage
that's an
talking about
extraordinary
this.
testimony. The kind of testimony that we love to hear about here on the Rock Newman Show. Rose, I turn to you and ask you, so you explained, there was a story in a story. You were incarcerated when your dad got killed. I'm gonna ask you, what has this particular experience, what has it done to change your life? And what do you want the rest of your life to be about?
Well, this really is along the pathway of my life. Even with the incarceration, you know, I'm a victim of mass incarceration. Hey, they run the red light, throw them in prison. So basically that's about where it was for me. So even in that, I was still on my road in my life. With my father's death, I think what this has done, it has, is this a word, heightened where I'm going or what I'm here to do. And that is to love those that are hard to love, to talk and speak about forgiveness from an example that I've had to show, and also to help others, you know, in their lives, with their situations and their problems and what they're going through. Just, I guess I could say, for humanity's sake. And the impact of my father being gone, you know, I keep that on a personal thing with me, between me and my dad. It's not something that I really bring the whole world in when I think about him, because it helps me to keep our relationship, you know, how we have been through so many things in our lives. And it just helps me to keep him as daddy, and not as this huge figure that the world is using now. You know,
you don't want to lose what is that intimate personal relationship that you had by over-speaking the issue. I get that.
Yeah, you said it better than me. That's what I felt. Yes, sure.
That's why you gotta show.
But I'm also honored to be his daughter, and I feel like that was something that was made to order just for me. And I believe that it is my purpose and my reason for being here on this planet, to be his daughter and to talk about him and help be involved, you know, be involved in projects like this, and to, you know, I think it's going to lead me and guide me on down the road, along with my own experiences that I have to talk about. And now here we have, as this intimate conversation, we have my dad's life and my life that are so intertwined where I can't talk about him without talking about me or vice versa. So I think that that is the main objective from God. I would say that, yes.
Well, certainly your spirit is shining a very bright light. Look, I'm going to take the liberty here as the host of the Rock Newman Show to come to you, Tiffany.
Okay.
I'm going to deviate away from Emanuel just for a second.
Okay.
And then we're going to finish up with Demas as we close out. But because he was such a legend in the Washington, D.C. area, I want you to take a minute or two to give a reflection as the daughter of Charles, and you know what I call him, Charles Chucky B. Chuck Hinton.
That is my great honor to do that. My dad, I'm blessed to have one of the most phenomenal dads in the world. A man who absolutely never broke a single promise to me. Even when he was old, even when he was failing in health, and you know, something as trite as traveling while he's sick, he has said, oh yeah, I'm gonna come to your birthday party or whatever, and it would be a great struggle for him to do that. But because he had already told me, he just kept his word. My dad is the man who, at 20-some years old, borrowed $1 from his mom to hitchhike his way to tryouts here in D.C. and ended up living his dream as a Major League Baseball player, and that eventually turned into him being a dream maker for men like you and countless other students that he blessed with scholarships to the great Howard University. But while he was even a Washington senator, a baseball player, on his off season, he would give back to the communities, and he would go to at-risk communities as a representative of the DC Department of Recreation, a roving leader, where he would pour into young people's lives. This is who I grew up with, you know, and eventually he founded the Major League Baseball Players Alumni Association. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, that didn't exist until he came up with the idea.
You know, in terms of imagining that, and just stay here for a second.
Right.
But to imagine that, and to imagine a person, a daughter, what it must mean for you to have the example of saying, my daddy never broke a promise.
Never once. I'm talking about, Daddy, can you bring me home something? It could be rain and snow, whatever. Never once.
Demas.
Never once
those
let me
some
down.
big shoes, man.
Never once.
Those some big shoes. So Demas, do me a favor, man, as we wrap this up here. We've got a few minutes left. Tell us about the work that you guys are continuing to do, because we've not had a chance to get to it very much, but you all have an ongoing, you said the book is named Street God, you have an ongoing active ministry. We've got 3 minutes and the floor is yours, and I'll tell you, and I do it, and I want you to do it from this perspective. We say at the beginning of every show, we hope to inspire you with stories of extraordinary achievement. And man, you guys, all of you, you fit that mold. So you can take us out.
So, you know, one example was this summer, we decided to spend the summer in Chicago on the streets, where Chicago has more homicides and killings than Iraq and Afghanistan put together, and that's on American soil. And a film will be coming out on that story. It's called Chicago, America's Hidden War. Rose came down, spent the 40 days with us. Right now I'm in Cleveland. There's been a lot of killings and shootings going on there. So we're going down, we're galvanizing thousands of young teenagers together to tell them a message of hope and how to overcome the lies of these lifestyles of gang banging that they're trying to live. So we were at Baltimore, we were at the Paris shootings. One of our family's mottos is very similar to be like Jesus is so big and lofty, it's hard to bring it down. But the guy that you said going to Damascus, the Apostle Paul. So we say, what would Paul do if he had a plane? If he had a car? If he could jump on a train? Where would he go? Where would he be? So as a family, we go into these areas and we try to bring hope and we try to bring love And that's a big priority for our lives. And we're just not seeing enough people do it. But we want to encourage anyone can go and show up and be of help if they want to. And
we have 1 minute left. I think, you know, can you provide information about how people can get in touch with you guys
Absolutely.
to maybe support or know more about what you're doing?
Sure. Absolutely. Number one, I would encourage you, pick up the book Street God. You'll hear our story. There's contact information in there. June 17th, gather friends and family, go see the movie Emanuel. That movie is going to be incredible. It's going to blow people away. They're going to really be encouraged by that. Also, they can go to PastorDimas.com or
D-I-M-A-S.
D-I-M-A-S.
Say it again.
Yeah. Matter of fact, they should go to thedynamiclifeministries.com and they can find us there. And we're trying to be everywhere to do a great work, Rob.
Thank you so much for joining us. Man, this has been awesome. Folks, thank you for joining us this evening also. For more information on this program and any other program produced by WHUT, go to WHUT.org. Goodbye, and may God bless you.
This program was produced by WHUT, Howard University Television, and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.